Hey everybody, Bob Murphy here again for another Econ Moment. In this episode, I thought I would just take a moment to sort of lay the foundation of my overall worldview and explain why it is that I so consistently will come to the conclusion that we shouldn't believe the government when it says that this particular policy is going to help a certain group of people and that it's really just a great thing and we should all just be so thankful that the government's going to now take steps to end some injustice, whatever the injustice of the day is that they've decided to focus on. Because the problem is when you start talking like that, people get suspicious, right? And they start thinking that, oh, the only reason you're against spending money to help poor people is because really deep down you don't really like poor people, do you? Or you really just care about big business and that's why you want to sweep away all these regulations that constrain businesses, because really deep down you're a shill for the big businesses. All right, so I understand there's that mentality out there, and so I just wanted to try to diffuse that and say I'm a libertarian with a small L, meaning I'm talking about the political philosophy, not about a political party per se. And rather than me try to defend that viewpoint, which basically says people have rights to their property and to their body, and that it's illegitimate for the government to interfere with those rights, and beyond that, that using my background as an economist, I can go through and point out all the different examples of the government interfering with property rights and then show you why actually it's counterproductive, that the very things the government says it's going to be solving by these interventions actually get worse. Or what happens in other cases is there's some social problem out there that the government comes along and says, oh, we need to fix that, just give us more power and more money, and that problem isn't due to the free market or just to voluntary intercourse among human beings, but no, the problem is due to prior interventions by the government to fix some other problem, and then they cause this new one. All right, so that's my general worldview, and instead of me trying to go through and explain piece by piece each element of that, let me try a different tack in this video. Let me talk to first the conservatives and then to the liberals or progressives, whatever label you want to use for yourself, and just try to get you to see you already agree with my view half the time. So for the conservatives, when it comes to the welfare state, right, you oppose that, right? You don't think it makes sense for the federal government to be paying boatloads of money to people because they're unemployed or because they're a single mom and have a bunch of kids. And you think it's crazy for the government to be establishing so-called public housing and to be spending gobs of money on public schools because you think that actually, first of all, it's unfair that to take money from people who work and give it to people who don't work. Right? For many of you, that's just the principle of the thing is offensive. But beyond that, you think actually it harms the people it's supposed to be helping, right? You think that it breeds dependency. You think that, especially for like inner city minority families, that all this government intervention actually has broken down the family social structure over the generations, and that you're not doing anybody any favors by giving them a check from the government. So if that's your understanding there, and maybe if you've studied some economics, you know that, for example, minimum wage laws actually cause unemployment. They hurt the very groups they're supposed to help. And moreover, when it comes to stuff like climate change, many of you who call yourselves conservatives, you think it's all a big hoax, don't you? You think it's really just a big power grab, and that the people in power who are trying to implement these things to tax carbon or limit greenhouse gas emissions through a cap-and-trade program, you think that really it's because they don't like our way of life, they're out to just cripple capitalism, and it just gives them a bunch of power that they can then hand out to their cronies. Right? That's your worldview on issues when it comes to big government domestically. And you're very suspicious. You don't trust the people in power. It's not just that you think they're wrong, you think that they're evil, don't you? So, if that's your view of the government and the kind of people that make it up and how they just lie and do all sorts of deception to harm the very groups they say they're helping when it comes to the U.S. domestic activities, why do you give them such a blank check when it comes to foreign policy? When it comes to literally giving them life and death decision-making power over not just foreigners at this point, but now U.S. citizens, as long as the president declares, well, I think that they're collaborating with terrorists and therefore we can just literally blow them up with drones at this point. I mean, that should make you sit up with alarm. So, again, it's not that I'm trying to tell you you shouldn't trust them when it comes to foreign policy. All I'm saying is be consistent. If you don't trust them when it comes to big government at home, then why would you trust them to engage in nation building? Okay. For the progressives, I hope you saw the logic there of what I just said, but now I want to turn it back on you. Many self-styled progressives, you were just tearing your hair out during the George W. Bush administration. It wasn't that you merely thought Don Rumsfeld and Dick Cheney were misguided, that you had an honest disagreement over the empirical evidence. No, you thought they were evil, didn't you? You thought they were just flat out lying at the press conferences, that they were funneling money to their crony capitalist buddies, Halliburton and stuff like that, that it was all a big ruse, that they didn't care about national security, and moreover, that what they're doing was making us less safe, right? It was going to provoke retaliatory terrorist strikes. So not only was it wasting hundreds of billions of dollars, killing bunches of people, but it was also making us less safe. And so that's why you were very jealous and you were very concerned about the Constitution when it came to matters of foreign policy. Okay, but then by the same token, if that's your view of government, at least when Republicans are in power, why in the world would you support a single-payer system of health care? Don't you see the power that that gives the federal bureaucrats if they now control the health care system? They can have access to people and know who's had abortions, who has HIV, who has medical conditions that might be embarrassing in various contexts, that they can determine who's in line to get a kidney transplant, for example. You don't think that these people that you, in other contexts, actually believe are cold-blooded killers to get their way and to funnel money to oil companies or arms manufacturers, these same people now, when it comes to the administration of programs dealing with domestic health care, you think that it's, oh, that's Sarah Palin, she's so paranoid when she talks about death panels. You believe in death panels when it comes to foreign policy. So again, I'm not trying to get you to believe me when I say there's a very serious threat here if we give the federal government so much power over the healthcare system, because you already believe that when it comes to other areas. All I'm asking you to do is to be consistent. So in conclusion, the libertarian, again the small L, meaning the political philosophy, not talking about political parties, the libertarian worldview is very distrustful of government officials in general. And using economic analysis, we find that case after case, when the government says it's going to take a bunch of money, assume new powers in order to solve some social problem, whether it's terrorism, which really is an issue, that's a problem, whether it's poor people, there really are poor people, whether it's illiteracy, whether it's unplanned teen pregnancies, you name the problem, and those are legitimate problems, but the point is the libertarian says, you know what, case after case, the so-called government solution actually makes the problem worse, and moreover, you start to get suspicious that the people pushing these programs actually have a different agenda. And again, if you're a conservative, you already agree with me when it comes to big government at home, and if you're a progressive, you already agree with me when it comes to police brutality and foreign policy. So all I'm asking is to be consistent. It can't be the case that the same people in office that you think are completely evil, a bunch of liars, power-hungry, hidden Marxists or fascists, depending on whether you're conservative or progressive, it can't be that those people suddenly turn magically good and it's only paranoid nut jobs who would be worried about them when it comes to the programs that you support. Well, that was some heady issues today, but I thought it was necessary to lay the foundation for these future videos. This has been yet another Econ Moment with me, Bob Murphy.